idea of a great value modern classic Porsche in this day and age seems almost incomprehensible. Values have gone absolutely berserk on anything with a Porsche badge on the front. But the car to my right says otherwise. It says that there's still some bargain basement Porsches to be had. And if you listen to certain people, they will tell you it's the best of the bunch. Is that the case though? Let's find out. Hello and welcome to the Porsche Boxster. Yes, what I've got here is an incredibly early 1996 first generation Porsche Boxster. And we're going to have a proper look around this thing inside and out. I would say under the bonnet, but there isn't really one. And then we're going to get it out on the road and I'm going to talk to you about what I think and whether this car lives up to the current hype that surrounds it. So let's crack on. Right, let's get all of the hairdressing jokes out of the way right off the bat. The poor man's Porsche jokes, because in the big 2026, in the modern era, they allegedly aren't true anymore. Small roadsters like this seem to be the hot commodity at the moment. If you listen to people in magazines and on Instagram and all of those trendy, cool places, they'll tell you that a very early base model Porsche Boxster is about as good as you can get. I'm not so convinced myself yet, but perhaps when I delve into this thing, I'll have my mind changed. Let's see. In the 1990s, Porsche were in dire straits, to say the least. They weren't the thriving powerhouse that they are today. No, financially, they were pretty much in the toilet. They needed something new and fresh because the 928 was an aging model that pretty much given up market-wise. They'd introduced the 968 to try and amend things, and it hadn't really worked. What they needed was something new and fresh and contemporary, and that's what they got with their all-new Porsche Boxster concept, which was introduced in 1993. It was a radical new thing for the brand, and it received excellent press. They seemed to be doing things right. It was an entirely new direction. It looked modern and fresh, and for the first time since a 914, they were describing a car as a roadster. It was a mid-engine layout, two-seater setup, pretty much as you see it today, minus a few different design tweaks, as is often the case with a concept car. The Boxster was pretty much a hit from day dawn. As soon as it was made available for purchase in 1996, it was selling in good numbers. It was made in a few different generations, right the way up until October of 2025, when Porsche ended the classic internal combustion engine Boxster and Cayman, the hardtop coupe variant of this, in favour of a new electric model that we'll see shortly. This particular car is a first generation, obviously, being such an early one, known as the 986, because it ran concurrently with the 996 911. The next generation, which would run alongside the 997, would be known as the 987. It's all fairly self-explanatory once you figure it out. The 986 first gen was produced from 1996 until 2004 and sold rather well. Around 114,000 of these, the base model cars, were sold, and then in 2000 a hotter Boxster S with a bigger engine and better performance was introduced, and a good 51,000 of those were sold. So overall, a rather successful model, one might say. Now, I must admit, the main reason I chose this specific Boxster is, one, because it's a really base spec early model, which everyone seems to like, but also because of this absolutely epic green leather interior, a thoroughly good spec from whoever optioned this car new. Inside, though, it's all very reminiscent of a Porsche 996 or an early 2000s 911. It's exactly what you're expecting to see in here. This particular example, as I said, is a rather base spec one, so there's not a lot in the way of options, but it does have an electric folding soft top roof and a few other gubbins here and there. It's comfortable enough to sit in when you're not moving, and there is a decent amount of space, but me personally, I think the equivalent Audi, the TT, had far more room. Well, it's at this point that I normally open up the bonnet and talk to you about the engine in the car that I'm reviewing, except this is a mid-engine car. It doesn't really have a bonnet as such, and you can't really see the engine anywhere from ground level. So I'm going to stand next to it and talk to you about the engines instead. All of the early Boxsters had a derivative of the M96 engine, a flat-six Boxster-style engine, which is where the name Boxster originates from. These early engines were a little bit troubled. There were issues with the casing and casting of the engines, which resulted in a lot of recalls, rebuilds, replacement engines very early on in Boxster, and in fact 911 production. However, they were, when they worked, potentially quite good. The early cars had a 2.5 litre variant of it, which was good for around 201 brake horsepower with a top speed of 149 miles an hour. Blistering, I know. In 2000, the base model would get itself an upgrade, the 2.5 litre scrapped and the 2.7 introduced instead, shoehorned in the mid there. it was good for around 228 brake horsepower and 155 miles an hour. So a nice improvement on power, but not quite as nice as Porsche's new trump card, the 3.2 litre Boxster S, which could do 260 brake horsepower and 161 miles an hour. Overall, a few good options paired with either a 5-speed manual gearbox, later on a 6 and a 7 in the really new fancy ones, or a Tiptronic automatic style gearbox. Lots to think about.
35 degrees and sunny, ideal Boxster weather, one might say. And if people on forums and on Instagram have anything accurate to say, this will be the best drive of my life. A very plain and simple Boxster. Let's find out whether there's any truth to that. Initial impressions are rather underwhelming, to say the least. I put my foot down pulling away there, and there wasn't a great deal of anything. There certainly wasn't any power, acceleration wasn't particularly quick, and there wasn't even now a great deal in the way of engine noise. The cabin is rather blustery, as you could probably tell from what little hair I have blowing around. However, when I get to a corner, maybe everything will change. Admittedly, when you do get to a corner, everything starts to make a little bit of sense. The weight distribution, the lightness of the car overall, the whole dynamic setup just works very nicely when it comes to the bends. I've had to do a slight bit of reorganisation with my camera mount, and as you can probably tell, it's bouncing around all over the place. The ride in here really does leave a lot to be desired. I can feel every lump, bump and imperfection in the road, to say the least. Perhaps if above all else you need something that corners well, more than anything else, that's your priority, you could justify a Boxster, but from where I am, it's really hard to see why you'd warrant one of these and the more premium price tag it demands over an Audi TT or even a Mazda MX-5, a BMW Z3 or 4. All seem to do everything else a little bit better. Yes, this corners excellently well, but the power delivery isn't there in this, the 2.5 litre unit. The acceleration isn't all that. The engine note, there's just not a lot of Porsche characteristic, and you sit here and you wonder, wow, I really should have bought a 911 if I wanted a Porsche 996. You could probably get one for not a great deal more than a nice, well sorted early Boxster, and for me, I just can't make any sense of it. I'm a little bit disappointed. Perhaps, and this is a bit of a radical thing, but people just say these are good because it makes them sound a little bit edgy and interesting, and because people on the internet say it's true, so it must be. But overall, I'm left wanting a little bit more from this Boxster. The 5-speed manual gearbox just doesn't seem all that well sorted for an engine like this. The throws seem long, and it seems like it revs quite highly and longs for a 6th gear. Overall, disappointment is in the air tonight.
So then, the Porsche Boxster 986 generation, what do I think? Well, to be honest, I'm left wanting a little bit more. I'm a little bit disappointed, and for probably the first time in history, people on the internet seem to have lied to me. Everyone told me this is the car that you're going to want. This is the one you're going to want to spend some money on, a very early 2.5 litre naturally aspirated plain Boxster. But it's just not very good to drive. It's not that enjoyable. I'm, as I say, left wanting a lot more. Behind the wheel, I was expecting great things, and in the corner, it's a very composed, very well-balanced car. But that's all it's got going for it. It's not particularly fast. It doesn't sound good. It's got no Porsche fanfare. And people saying, oh, you don't need a 911, all you need is a Boxster. I really don't know what they're talking about. It's just not that great of a car compared to your competitors. If you think for around 700-800 quid, you can get yourself a 1.8 turbo, 225 BAM Audi TT, which is a Quattro. I argue looks a little bit better. It definitely drives a lot better. There's more room. And I even think it might sound better. This car just feels a little bit muted to me, and whilst I can see there is some appeal and it is becoming a modern classic, I can't say I'd put my money where my mouth is with one of these just yet. Perhaps if I drove a bigger Boxster S, things might be a little bit different. I'll have to try and find one of those to give it a go, and then maybe I'll be eating humble pie, but at present, not for me. Thank you very much for watching the video review of this lovely little Porsche Boxster. I do hope you've enjoyed. If you like this sort of thing, please check out our other video reviews. And remember, if you have a classic or modern classic car to sell, please get in touch with us.